Lacey Everett here with Minds in Motion. In order to help others, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps us grow our community. Share the love, spread the love. If this video impacts you, send it to others so they can reap the benefits as well. Today we get to meet Lauren, who served in the Peace Corps, and she's going to walk us through the extraordinary experience that she had and the knowledge that she gained, and she is going to give that knowledge to us. Lauren went to Malawi, Africa. She's going to talk about different life lessons that were instilled in her that she wants to share with us. We bring awareness to a new culture and how she immersed herself in living in Malawi, Africa, in the village that she was in, and her everyday routine that she went through. Lauren gives us wonderful mindset tips that we can take with us forever, and she talks about what it was like for her to adapt. We talk about the culture shock that happens when you come back to the youth or to where you grew up. You are going to learn so many different aspects to culture, diversity, and much more that is so important. So I am so excited for you all to meet Lauren. Here we go.
Hi, Lacey.
I am so grateful, so grateful that we get to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
So fun. We're going to build so much knowledge, and what you've experienced in the Peace Corps is just absolutely breathtaking, fascinating. So I thought we could just start with talking about where you went and how you got involved with the Peace Corps.
For sure. Peace Corps is definitely a life-changing experience in all the good ways that you can possibly imagine. So I went to Malawi, Africa in 2009. I stayed until 2011. I was an environmental volunteer. So I worked with my Malawian counterpart, was a forest ranger there. My village was situated right on the border between Malawi and Zambia, and there was a national forest right there. And so I worked with this forest ranger in the forest and then in the surrounding area in the village.
So what got you there was the environmental studies being in your life, and you heard about it.
Right. Yeah. Kind of. So when I applied for the Peace Corps, they kind of like you to have some experience in a field before they send you over. Like if you're a teacher, you're going to go into education. If you're involved in health in some way, you're going to go into health and environmental. It's the same way. And so when I went over there, granted, when I was in college, I didn't study environmental studies at all. But when I was doing my applications and my interviews and things, I really focused on, it's like, hey, I grew up in a farming community. My family is a farming and ranching community. This has been a huge part of my life, all my life. And so I really want to be in that capacity, whatever country I get sent to, that's where I want to be. And I told him, I want to be outside. I don't want to be stuck in a building somewhere. I want to be outside so that I can really experience the environment there, as well as, get more experience with the people there and how they live in whatever country they sent me to. This is before I knew I was going to Malawi. So that's, I really pushed on my past, experiences growing up to get me into an environmental volunteer position.
I've always thought that if there was someone to be in the Peace Corps, it would be you, because of your upbringing in Montana on a farm outside most of the day on acres of land. It's really fascinating that you wanted to do something like that. I admire that part in you. That's like a huge strength. More people need that, just like you had a lot of the tools already instilled in you to handle something like that. Because I'm sure in Malawi and Africa, I'm sure it was a culture shock, would you say? Or you had to adapt to the village you were in, I'm sure.
Oh, very much so. Coming from America, we're in a first world country. We're living in a first world country. And going to Malawi, it's a third world country. It's quite the culture shock, not only seeing the poverty that's there and that people live in daily, but just the, the quality of life, the healthcare, and things like that. It's quite the shock. So when you get accepted to the Peace Corps, when I got accepted, and I went over, the Peace Corps puts you in a training program. You go through training while you're in country for the first 2-3 months that you're in country. You're not a volunteer yet because you haven't been sworn in to be a volunteer. But you spend those 3 months, like they put us in a training village. What it was like, they put us actually with each volunteer went with a Malawian family. We lived with a training family, and it was not just training. In fact, we were learning the language. That was one thing, we were every single day, every morning for like 4 hours, we'd go as a group. There's some of us that would go as a group, and we'd sit and we'd learn the language. Because that's Chichewa, which is the language for Malawi, I have had a very difficult time with it. I never got fluent, but you went and we're learning the language, learning the grammar part of the language, but then you're also learning culture while you're learning the language. And then in the afternoon, since we were environmental volunteers, we would go with Malawian counterparts or Malawian teachers and learn about different environmental projects that we could do and environmental issues that the country was having. We'd learn about these different things and about different projects that we could start in our communities if we wanted, but also living with our family. That's where the cultural part came in. Like we were learning how to wash our clothes by hand, even just taking a bucket bath, using a pit latrine to go to the bathroom, sleeping in our mosquito net, eating, meals with the family. And the cultural aspect of it, like Malawi is, it's very patriarchal. Men and women are separated for different functions, like going to church or something. Men and women sit in different parts of the church, or like a funeral or something. Men and women are separated. They're different, they sit in different places. The meals that I would have with my family in the morning, my amai, which is mother, my host mother, she would sit with me and eat breakfast, and she was so sweet. I had a boiled egg every morning, along with like some rice porridge or whatever, and bread and stuff. But the egg is what I remember the most. She would peel my boiled egg for me as a respect. She was being respectful and and honoring me that way by peeling my egg. Learning all these different things for like about 3 months before you're actually sworn in as a volunteer. And like I took the same oath of office that our president takes. I took that same oath when I became a volunteer. You're representing the United States. You're representing our country. And so you want to uphold that and represent it to the best of your ability. And that oath is a part of it and everything. But we were sworn in. We went to the U.S. ambassador to Malawi. We were in his house, we were at his house in his backyard, and he swore us in.
I admire you so much for doing something like this. And it has me thinking of the concept of perspective, because it sounds like you adapted to a new culture and new food, new people, new environment, new culture, all the things. It's interesting because I remember when I went to France, you go there and you think, oh, everything is so small here. Oh, all the restaurants, everything, and the beds and the houses, everything's very small. But maybe the US is just big. We think, because we're used to being in the US, of course we're going to think, oh, they peel our boiled eggs for us. That's interesting. But it could just be perspective, because I'm sure she could come here and think, they're not peeling my eggs. Where is the egg? First of all.
So where's the respect? She was doing it, doing that out of respect, and there's so much of that is very apparent in their culture, like they respect their guests. And especially since I was white, it was there was more of that there, or I saw a lot more of it.
So. Yeah, you recognize your privilege, and it's that's so interesting. And yes, the respect. So she could possibly come here and think there is no respect in this household. I mean, yeah. And so it's perspective, would you say?
Oh, very much so. And, I'll go back to like the respect thing. And it was always interesting to me, like when I got into my village and, and I'd been there for a while and I started going to these meetings and these higher up meetings, or even like going to a funeral or something like that, where men and women were separated. Yes, I'm a woman and I should have been with the women. I shouldn't have been allowed or not really accepted to go with the men. But because I was white, I could float between the two gender groups. I could go back and forth if I wanted to. If I was going to a community meeting that typically only men went to, I could go and it was fine. And I was respected and wanted to be there. People wanted me to be there. But then, if I went to a funeral, say, I could have, the women usually sat in the house with the deceased to mourn the deceased. And then the men were outside somewhere. I could have gone back and forth between the groups, but then in certain situations like that, I stayed with the women because I wanted to really show them that, I respect your culture a lot. That was a lot of what I personally tried to do in my village, was show that I respect your culture. And I wanted to learn about your culture as much as possible. So if women stayed in the house with the deceased, that's where I stayed, because that's what was culturally appropriate and what was culturally expected of women. So that's where I stayed, because I wanted to identify that way. I wanted to identify with them for that.
Yes. And Lauren, I truly admire that so much. It's one, you recognize the white privilege that you have there, and you also are such a great role model for people to look up to. I'm serious, because you recognize that you have that with them, and you still are humble enough to learn and experience and respect them, because it sounds like it's not just the rules they have, it's all about respect and honor and the culture that they lived in. So you're just such a great role model.
Thanks. There's a lot of, they really valued the respect there. And even when I first moved into my village, I kind of had to fight because they wanted to do everything for me. My family that I lived with wanted to do everything for me. They wanted to wash my clothes, cook my food, clean my house. They wanted to fetch my water. They wanted to do everything for me. And I kind of had to, I would remember I was digging some garden beds in my yard, and it was hard work, definitely. And there was a little boy that came over from my family, and he was helping me dig and, and do stuff like that. So we were kind of talking and stuff. And then this other woman, came over, just, marched right on into my yard and took my kasu that I was digging with and started digging. And I had to go back up to her and take it back. And it was like, I need a job. I need something to do. What am I going to do if you keep doing this for me? And I know she was just trying to help, and she was, again, just trying to be respectful and everything, but I had to kind of assert myself that way, that I am capable of doing these things and I want to learn how to do these things. And that was interesting for others to try to understand. It was that, hey, she wants to learn how to do these things. We need to let her do these things. They were being respectful because I was a guest, but I was also living there. I spent 2 years with this family, and I wanted to be able to show them and to show myself too that I could do these things, that I am capable of doing these things. And also that kind of let them see that, because they have these pre-impressions of what Americans are, what they do, and how what their work ethic is, and things. So I wanted to show them I want to do these things, and I am capable of doing these things. Not all Americans are like what you see in that fashion magazine that it comes over. We don't dress like that all the time. and stuff. There's different sides to different Americans.
I'm so grateful that we're having this talk. It's so prevalent. It's like you were fighting against the stigma. So I'm curious what it was like for you then to come back home to the US after that long in Africa, Malawi. And I'll say this, I remember when I was in Peru, I came home and I almost had the culture shock when I came back to the US, because I thought, wow, these people are so privileged. And there's doctors on every corner. I even thought, wow, my bed is so big. Or wow, there's a toilet. Or little things like that. The littlest things that, we take for granted. And
you don't think when you go over that, you're prepared that there will be a culture shock when you go to a foreign country like Malawi or Peru. You're prepared for that culture shock. What you're not prepared for is the culture shock coming back to the US. You're not prepared for that. Nobody talks about it either. But yes, there's definitely some culture shock. Like, my first bit of culture shock was just even coming home, just even traveling home, going through the airports. I remember sitting in the airport. It might have been New York or Boston or someplace like that. So a big airport, and there's lots of people around. And I went to one of those little Starbucks kiosks and everything to get my first bit of American food. I haven't had American food in 2 years. So I got like a scone and a fruit cup and a latte or something like that. And I remember sitting there, and eating and finishing, you got the plastic forks and, the silverware and napkins and stuff like that. I remember sitting there with that plastic fork for a long time, looking at it, and it's like, I should save this. I might need this later. I might need a fork later. I need to save this. The thing I find in America is that we are such a throwaway culture. And that was the hardest thing for me to kind of get used to again, or to accept again, is that throwaway culture. Because I was I kid you not, Lacey, I was ready to save that plastic container that my fruit salad came in and save that plastic fork. I was ready to stick it in my purse and save it, because I didn't know when I would need it again or if I would need it again, but I better save it. And that stuck around for a long time.
What's the concept? And two, if I was there, I would have validated you. I would have been like, stick it in your purse, Lauren. Yes. Like you said it perfectly. No one really prepares us for the culture shock you get when you come home. That's not even a thing. It's not even talked about. So I love this conversation. And I also think just traveling in itself is such an education. And then when you're immersing, and then when you're doing like what you did in Malawi and immersing yourself in it, living with the families. You're training. You're not in a training, sitting, looking at lectures, reading books in a classroom. You're living in it, learning the language right away.
Learn a culture is to live with that culture. Because then you're not only learning the language, but you're learning all these small cultural norms that you just never think about, or that they can't teach you in a book. And so that's that's really exciting.
Yes. And what was it like day to day for you when you were done with your training and you were out and in the village? What was it like day to day?
So it's for volunteers, and for me, it was very important to establish a routine. And I had other volunteers who had been there for a while express that to me too. You need to establish a routine. And then you also need to make your home, make your house a place like your sanctuary, a place that you can go to that is a safe space for you, but it's comfortable. too, because you need that. You know, for your mental health, you need that space where you feel safe and comfortable. So the first 3 months that I was in my village, like my house was, it was a raw shell, basically, is what my house was when I moved into it. It was brick walls, raw brick walls, a dirt floor, and a thatched roof. So I spent the first 3 months, I hired people to do this. And they cemented my floor, put cement down. They plastered my walls and painted them. And then we put more thatch on the roof and everything. And then I spent a lot, and, you know, I had to have furniture made too. I didn't have a kitchen table. I had a foam mattress, but I didn't have a bed frame, didn't have any chairs or anything. So I spent really the first 3 months making that house livable for me, and then, you know, slowly adding to it. So the routine that I established while I was there, I did yoga every day. I would tell the Malawians, because they didn't really understand the concept of stretching and doing exercise and stuff like that. So in order to, and I was very strict about, this is my time. This is my time to recenter myself and get ready for the day. So I would tell, I told my neighbors, you know, and my family and everything, this is my time. I'm praying at this time. And they're very respectful of religion. So I knew that if I, you know, when I told them that I was praying, I knew I wouldn't be disturbed. And my family knew, like I had a fence around the back part of my house and a gate that was on my back porch. And my family knew that when I opened my gate, it was kind of like, then I'm open for business, you know, kind of thing. But if my gate stayed closed, that meant I didn't want to be disturbed. So I did my yoga every morning. And then I would start to, if I wasn't going out into the community for any reason, like I wasn't meeting with my counterpart, I wasn't going into the boma for some reason, after yoga, I would take my buckets one at a time, walk the 100 yards to the tap and get water for the day. And I might make 2 or 3 trips. And you know, and I'm carrying my buckets on my head. You know, I learned how to do that. It's a great, like, shoulders, your abs, your neck, you know, it's a great workout that way. And I'd get home and then I'd start doing whatever it was that I had to do around the house. You know, I could start doing laundry in the morning. You know, I'd wash my clothes, dig in my work in my garden, or, you know, something like that. My abambo, it's my host father. He spoke English really well, first off. So he's how I communicated really with the rest of the family. And so sometimes we would just spend a good while just sitting on our porches, because our houses were really close, and we'd sit on our porches and we'd just chat back and forth. You know, he'd ask me questions about America, you know, and I would explain certain things to him, and he'd do the same for me. That's really part of the Peace Corps' mission, is that exchange of culture. You know, so that's what I really focused on, was that exchange of culture there. Sometimes I'd have, my garden was all organic. You know, I didn't use any fertilizers or anything. And the Malawians, they use a lot of fertilizer. They're all subsistence farmers. So when they're growing their maize, their corn, they're using chemically treated seeds so that it'll grow better. So, you know, I really made it a point and really put the word out there that none of my vegetables are grown with chemicals in any way. I used compost. I had a compost pit next to my kitchen house, and so I'd have certain times of the year more than others, but I'd have folks come over and they'd want to see and they'd look at my tomatoes and be like, really, you grow this without chemicals, you know, without fertilizer, you grow this. And they were, you know, really interested in that. There was a young man, and he'd always bring his youngest child with him, come and look and have me talk about compost with him and stuff. When my pumpkins were growing really well, they eat the leaves, they eat the pumpkin leaves. And so we would, sometimes, you know, women from around the village knew that I grew lots of pumpkins, you know, and had lots of leaves and stuff. And so they'd come over and ask if they could pick the leaves to take for their dinner. You know, and of course I always said yes, because I wasn't going to eat them. So
your garden was popping. It sounds like You were teaching them while they were also teaching you things.
Exactly.
During your whole experience there.
We would always go out in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. It was miserable. Lacey, it's so hot, and we're riding our bikes to these villages to go around and talk with people because they were home in the afternoon. They'd go out early morning, work in their field, and they'd be home in the afternoon. So it was the best time to catch people at home. And we would talk about tree nurseries. We started quite a few tree nurseries in different villages. Because one of the things we were trying to combat, being next to that forest reserve, charcoal is a big industry, like the making of charcoal and the selling of charcoal, because they can get a lot of money for it. It burns, charcoal burns for a long time, so they can cook with it. But for every 5 pounds of wood creates 1 pound of charcoal. So they're decimating their natural forests, their national forests, because the tree poachers go into these national forests, cut down the trees, make charcoal, and sell it. So we were going to these villages to try and get them to start tree nurseries with fast growing straight trees. So eucalyptus, blue gum was one that we always were trying to get them to grow, because blue gum grows really fast and really straight. So they can cut the trees then and use them to build their houses and use them for firewood and things like that, without having to cut their native tree species down. So during the dry season, so October, we'd ride our bikes to these villages and be like, hey, you want to start a group and plant these trees? And then, some of them would be like, nah, whatever. But then there'd be some, we'd start some groups, and we'd get a group of like 10 individuals, and they'd be willing to start these tree nurseries. So then we'd go back, with all these tree seedlings and these planting tubes, these plastic little seedling tubes that we could fill with dirt and then start the seeds in. So we'd do that October, November. The group would care for the trees. We'd get them started and everything, and have days where we'd, show them, it's like, this is how you fill the tube with soil, and, then plant the seed. And some of the seeds needed to we'd take fingernail clippers and clip one end of them so that they'd start easier. Villagers would tend to these tree seedlings until they got big enough that we could outplant. And then the villagers would come, the group members would come, and they'd take their bunch of trees and, that they wanted, and start tree nurseries of their own, grow and then harvest in a few years. And we'd try to get the same people to start their tree nurseries every year, start a new crop every year, so that every year they would have a fresh crop of trees that they could cut down and use. It was like a garden on a large scale, really.
Here in the US, or where we are right now, even this Zoom call is just, a click away,
Right.
Or, let's just Google how to plant seeds and build a tree nursery. It's just, and so for you to have to ride bikes to these other communities in the blazing heat and to form these relationships, beautiful in that it's building awareness for something that's not talked about as much, and something that a lot of people don't even have awareness about or knowledge about. And so that's why I love this conversation.
Or trying to adapt a mindset for a lot of people, because, when we do the same thing, you get doing something for, farming or planting your garden or whatever, and doing something, you generationally, you get doing it the same way year after year after year. And you don't realize that could be a better way for the environment to be able to grow your crops or to do things, because your grandparents did it this way, so I'm going to keep doing it that way. So it was trying to adapt that mindset to change. And it was difficult, all the old timers there in the village, they didn't want to change because it worked well to do it this way. So, and they didn't want to change. So for me, when I left, it was really, and I worked with kids quite a bit, both, just little kids as well as like high school age kids. And really my biggest hope when I left was that I made enough of an impression on some of those younger minds that when they're adults, they could be like, oh, hey, I remember, this white lady that was living there in the village when I was little, and she did things this way. I'm going to try it this way. And that was always my biggest hope when I left, is that something like that would happen.
Really impeccable about what you did is that we internalize things, whether we realize we are or not, things that are happening to us, we're internalizing. So it would make sense for them to grow up and remember these things that you taught them in different ways. And you even talking about things that they taught you right now, years later, in different ways too. Reminds me of intergenerational transmissions with that theme of my mom did it this way, so I do it this way, or my mom's mom cooked it this way, so I'm going to cook it this way because that's what you're supposed to do. But really, we have to build literacy and build openness to challenging those thoughts.
It's hard to try and change that mindset or adapt that mindset. Whether it's you and I changing our mindset about something, or trying to help these folks that I lived with adapt their mindset into it. And it takes a while. It doesn't happen immediately. And I think we need to accept that, not only for ourselves, but with the people that we're working with.
Humans don't like change. I mean,
we
our
don't,
species,
not at all.
So it's hard enough to accept and be open-minded. So I just admire that you worked towards that. And I hope that people who watch this would take that lesson from this education we're getting right now.
Going to Malawi, Africa was way out of my comfort zone. I never wanted to go to Africa. When I first joined the Peace Corps, it was the last place I wanted to go, but it was what they had available for me. And I went because I wanted to go somewhere. And I'm so grateful that I stepped out of that comfort zone because I went, because otherwise it's a place I would never have gone. It's a continent I never would have gone to. So stepping out of your comfort zone, I think, is important. It's scary, but it's important because it really makes you realize what it is you can do. Like I came back from my experience, my time over there, a much more confident individual and a much more compassionate individual. Maybe I would have gotten there if I hadn't have gone, but I definitely got there in a different way and through experiences that I'm so grateful that I had to see who you are and what you can accomplish when you step out of that comfort zone.
Yes, you truly said it so wonderfully. And that acceptance piece seems to be important too, of accepting, hey, this is out of my comfort zone. Okay. And I can tolerate this. I can do this.
I survived doing this. I can do anything.
Yeah, it builds evidence for you. It builds evidence. So then the next time you're uncomfortable or being placed in your discomfort or, out of your comfort zone, you'll feel, well, I did it the last time and I survived. So I might as well try this time. And two, it sounds like you don't know unless you try.
Exactly. You don't know anything unless you try it. Whether it's trying a different food or trying a different experience, you just don't know unless you try.
Yes. I loved this, Lauren. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Lacey. This was fun.
You are such a great role model for humanity. Yes.
Thanks.
I loved this. Well, I'm wishing you all the positive vibes. Thank you so much. You are appreciated.
Thank you, Lacey. I enjoyed doing this. This is a lot of fun. Bye.